It seems like everybody loves darn tough socks, but boy howdy, they can cost an arm and a foot. Are they really as tough as the name implies? Or does Darn Tough Vermont just trick us into believing they are with that no questions asked lifetime warranty? So let's find out. Can these cheaper merino wool socks beat Darn Tough? In our first test, we're going to look at how warm these socks are when dry and when wet. Then we'll see which ones dry the fastest. We'll look at wear and tear with a stretch test and an abrasion test. Comfort is in the feet of the beholder, but I'll tell you what I think about that too.
Gear up and get outside.
Our incumbent is the Darn Tough Vermont Boot Full Cushion Midweight Hiking Sock, which sells for $30 as of the time of filming. This was Outdoor Gear Lab's top pick for the best hiking sock. These challengers cost anywhere from $3.75 to $25 per pair. Here's a list of all the socks I'm testing along with their prices and some other info of interest. Feel free to pause your screen to geek out for a minute. These include popular brands like Farm to Feet, Smartwool, Costco, and Wigwam, as well as some Amazon favorites with names that make you smile like time may tell, or maybe it won't. We'll see. These are all full cushion, midweight socks that are designed for year-round hiking, work, and everyday wear. I bought and paid for all of these socks, by the way. The only thing sponsored in this video is this Ver watch. For this first test, I filled an electric water kettle with water and brought it to a boil. Then I filled 4-ounce plastic bottles with the hot water. Then I put a bottle in the toe of each sock and I set the socks outside on a table. I made sure to leave similar space between the toes of each sock so the proximity to each other wouldn't impact the results. I also left one bottle out with no sock as control. I measured the temperature of the control water at the beginning with a pin thermometer to use as the baseline starting temperature for comparison afterwards. It was 160 degrees Fahrenheit. It was a chilly winter day with an outside temperature of 36 degrees Fahrenheit as measured by a Bluetooth thermometer. I set a 1-hour timer on my phone and then I waited. When the 1-hour timer went off, I removed the bottles from the socks and measured the temperature of the water immediately. The Darn Tough was at 99.3 degrees. The Costco Kirkland Signature was at 95 degrees. The Smartwool was at 92.1 degrees. The -33 was at 99.5 degrees. The Fox River was the warmest at 106 degrees. The Farm to Feet Boulder was the next warmest at 100.9 degrees. The other Farm to Feet was at 95.5. The Cloudline was on the cooler side at 93.4 degrees. The Omni-Wool was 95.4 degrees. The Wigwam made the top 3 at 100.6 degrees. The REI only beat the Smartwool at 92.7 degrees. The Time May Tell was the average temperature of 96.1 degrees. The Avada was 97.5 degrees, and the Go With was 95.7 degrees, which surprised me since it feels thicker than most of the other socks, and it also uses alpaca wool, which is supposed to be warmer than merino. The temperature of the control water at the end was 55 degrees Fahrenheit for a total loss of 112 degrees since the start. The outside air had warmed slightly during the test to 39 degrees. Here's a table of the results in order from warmest to least warm. As you can see, the Fox River was the warmest, only losing 61 degrees of warmth, making it 51 degrees warmer than the control sample with no sock. The Farm to Feet Boulder and Wigwam socks were also quite toasty, but the REI and Smartwool were the least impressive, losing nearly 75 degrees of heat and only 38 degrees warmer than nothing. But keep in mind that this isn't a lab test. I'm just a dude with a bunch of socks and pent-up curiosity, so there's certainly some room for error in here, but it gives you an idea of what to expect. Note that these are all socks that are advertised as mid-weight and full cushion, but there's no specific standard for that, so the thickness and cushion varies from brand to brand. If warmth is important to you, many of these companies offer a variety of socks with different thicknesses, which will be more or less warm. Next, I repeated the same test, but with wet socks. I filled the sink with water and soaked all the socks in there for a few minutes, swishing them around to make sure they were all soaked and wet. Then I gave each sock one gentle squeeze so they wouldn't be sopping and dripping water all over, but they were all still completely wet, about like they would be if you stepped in the creek without waterproof shoes. I followed the same procedure with fresh bottles of hot water and stuck them in the toes of the now wet socks. Once laid outside, I checked the control temperature, which was 167 degrees Fahrenheit, same as the first test. Hot dang, I must have been doing something right. It was 39 degrees outside with a slight breeze when I started the timer. After 1 hour, the water from the Darn Tough sock was 72.9 degrees Fahrenheit. Costco sock was 77 degrees. The Smartwool was 74.5 degrees, which was also the average result for all the socks in this test. The -33 was 75.7. The Fox River did well again at 79.9 degrees, but the Farm to Feet Boulder was the warmest this time at 82.2 degrees. The other Farm to Feet, however, did the worst at 68.5 degrees. The Cloudline did much better this time at 79.7. The Omni-Wool was 75.2, the Wigwam was 69.8, the REI was 69.6, the Time May Tell was 73 degrees, the Avada was 68.7 degrees, and the Go With did better this time at 76.1 degrees. The control sample water was at 56 degrees at the end, and the ambient air had cooled just slightly to 37 degrees. The temperature spread of the wet socks was only 14 degrees, not as wide as the 24-degree spread when the socks were dry. But this time, the Farm to Feet Boulder was the clear winner at 82.2 degrees after losing 85 degrees of heat. The Fox River and Cloudline were close behind. Despite the fact that the Alvada is one of the most popular merino socks on Amazon with more than 26,000 reviews and the definitely not photoshopped flames depicting how hot they are, they brought up the rear in this test at only 68.7 degrees, losing 98 degrees of heat. The Fox River Wick Dry Tramper and the Farm to Feet Boulder hiking socks were the clear winners of the warmth test, while the REI Midweight performed the worst. If you're enjoying this video even one little bit, do me a solid and hit that like or subscribe button so the YouTube algorithm lets this video see the light of day. If you don't like my methods, comment away. Tell me what I should do differently to make it better. Chances are the way I did this test or one of the next ones is really gonna get your goat. If you're not a natural troll or Karen, be my guest and use kind words to say mean things. Merino is known to wick moisture and dry faster than other materials, which is nice when your feet are sweaty. But it's even nicer when you're on a backpacking trip and you want to wash your socks in the creek to get the funk out, but you don't want to wait forever for them to dry. So I tested for dry time. First, I weighed each sock when it was dry. Next, I threw them all in the washer for a rinse and spin cycle, just like my mother would do to my brothers and me with the garden hose before we could come in the house after we'd been mucking around in the mud hole out back. I pulled them out of the washer and weighed them again. Unsurprisingly, the amount of water each sock retained varied, despite the fact that they all experienced the same rinse and spin treatment. The Darn Tough and Omni-Wool actually retained the most water at 18 grams. The Alvada retained the least at 9 grams. The average was 15 grams of water weight. I hung all the socks to air dry in my office because they would have frozen outside. My thermometer read 68 degrees by the socks at the start, and the warmest it got while they were hanging was 72 degrees Fahrenheit. I weighed each sock every 30 minutes for the first 2 hours, then every 15 minutes until they all reached their original dry weights. It makes sense that the Alvada dried the quickest in only 2 hours and 15 minutes since it retained the least amount of water in the first place. The time may tell was right behind it at 2.5 hours. I think the loose weave and thicker fibers make these Amazon specials drain well in the washing machine spin cycle, though I'm not sure if that will hold true when you wash them by hand or accidentally step in the lake. The Cloudline was dry after 3 hours, then the Fox River and Kirkland Signature were dry 15 minutes later. The majority of the socks were dry after 3.5 hours, but the Darn Tough and Farm to Feet Boulder took a smidgen longer at 3 hours 45 minutes. For the most part, these socks all dried fast enough for most folks. I'm sure it'd be even faster in the summer sun or next to the stove in a hot tent. If you like these gear tests and want even more insights, summaries, and exclusive test data, as well as outdoor gear deals, stories, and free gear giveaways, sign up for the Honey Hole, our free email newsletter. Link below and up here. Testing for comfort and fit is highly subjective since we all have different feet and preferences. Nonetheless, here's my own personal opinion on each sock after trying them on in brand new, unwashed, unused condition. I put them on, then put shoes on, and took a micro walk about halfway to my mailbox and back. I noted how they fit and felt, in particular whether they fit snug and didn't slip around my calf or ankle, or bunch up by my toes, if they were true to size, and how they felt on my feet. After trying them all, here's how I rank them. They were all super comfortable to be honest, but if I had to pick favorites, they'd be the Darn Tough, the -33, and the Farm to Feet. But you might like different ones better. The Darn Tough was indeed extremely comfortable and more form-fitting than many of the others. I noticed a tiny bit of slippage around my calf, but it's hard to tell if that would be an issue out hiking or doing chores. The -33 was very soft and stayed put well. And the Farm to Feet midweight felt awesome all around. It's not super snug on the calf, but it's super comfy. No complaints on the Wigwam either. They're like pillows for your feet. My least favorites were the REI, Time May Tell, and Alvada. They all fit a bit loosey-goosey, so my foot slid around a tad inside. They seem to have a looser weave, and it's like you can feel the thicker threads more than you can the finer wool in the other socks. They're definitely not uncomfortable, I'm just digging for something insightful to say here. I would also note that the Fox Rivers and Omni-Wools felt a bit too large for my US size 11 foot and slipped around my calf a bit, so their sizing might not be quite as precise as the others. Now we get into wear and tear. This is where we ought to see if Darn Toughs are indeed darn tough, or if they're just pretty tough with a pretty warranty policy that keeps people's mouths shut like political hush money. The first durability test is simple. We're going to wash them in a machine and dry them in a dryer like some kind of anti-fastidious ne'er-do-wells who don't give two hoots about the merino wool washing sermons given by A-type Reddit trolls and Karens the world over. But first, I measured the original length of each sock to the nearest half centimeter in brand new, unwashed condition. Then I turned them inside out just to make Karen somewhat happy, but I washed and dried them all together like the rest of the human race, no special treatment for any sock. As soon as I removed them from the dryer, I turned one of each sock right side out so I could observe any changes in the condition of the sock material inside and out. The inside of the Darn Tough appeared to have the most pilling and loose wool fibers out of all the socks, though I did notice the softer socks with the finer weave appeared more worn than those with a looser weave in general. The Costco looked good but was a little fuzzy inside, less than the Darn Tough though. The Smartwool had some loose threads inside but no visible fuzz. The -33 had some fuzziness and pilling inside, but not bad. I could barely notice any fuzziness on the Fox River. Farm to Feet Boulder looked like new. The other Farm to Feet wasn't quite as bad as the Darn Tough, but similar pilling and fuzz inside. Very little fuzz at all on the Cloudline. The Omni Wool still looked brand new. Trace amounts of fuzz on the Wigwam, but it did have one loose thread inside. Same story on the REI sock as the Wigwam. The Time Maytail looked good outside, no fuzz, but some loose threads inside. The Alvada looked brand new outside, but had loose threads inside. The Go With had a tiny bit of fuzz outside, but looked new inside. I also measured them while still inside out to see how much they shrank in the wash. On average, the socks shrunk by 2 centimeters. The Fox River and REI socks barely shrunk at all, while the -33 Costco Special and Alvada shriveled the most at 4.5, 4, and 3.5 centimeters respectively. But then I put the socks on, gave them a good toe wiggle, took them off, and measured again to see if that would restore the original length. Indeed, that loosened things up a bit. The Fox River, Farm to Feet, Boulder, and Cloudline resumed their exact original length, while the Darn Tough, Smartwool, REI, and Go With were barely shorter. The Costco, -33, and Time Maytail held out the most at 2.5 centimeters shorter than new. Based on the results, I gave each sock a relative score from 1 to 5, where 5 is the best. Fox River, Farm to Feet, Boulder, Cloudline, Omni Wool, Wigwam, and Go With all got high marks for exhibiting minimal changes after the first wash. The Time Maytail, Alvada, and -33 shrunk the most and showed loose threads. This was just one wash cycle, and you really need a couple dozen to know how these socks will fare over time, but this should give you an idea. Next, I wanted to test how well these socks return to their original length with a stretch test. I clamped a tarp clip on both ends of each sock. On one end, I attached a 5-pound sandbag. Then I hung the opposite end to a cord so the weight would stretch the sock. I left the socks hanging for 1 hour. I didn't have enough supplies to do them all at once, so I broke them up into 3 groups. I measured the length of each sock at max stretch while hanging. The Fox River, Farm to Feet, and Alvada stretched the most, at or near 180% their original lengths. The Go With and Farm to Feet Boulder stretched the least at around 140% of their length when new. After 1 hour, I removed the stretched socks and measured them again immediately. The -33 and Time Maytail retracted to within 3% of their original lengths, only 1.5 centimeters. That's impressive. 15 minutes later, I measured again, and the Costco, -33 and Time Maytail were each within 1% or half a centimeter of their original length, while the Fox River, Smartwool, and Farm to Feet were still stretched the most. Then I put each stretch sock on, wiggled the old dogs once more for good measure, and took the socks off before I measured their lengths one last time. To my delight, the Darn Tough, Costco, -33, Time Maytail, Alvada, and Go With all came to within 1.5 centimeters or less than 5% of their original lengths, some even shrinking back to their post-wash test length, essentially flipping the bird at my stretch test. The Smartwool and Farm to Feet Boulder remained the most stretched at 4 centimeters, nearly 2 inches longer than when new. My final test of tensile strength and darn toughness was an abrasion test. I fixed a strip of 180 grit sandpaper to my workbench. Then I took a plastic foot called Tim.
This is Tim, but don't worry, no actual Tims were harmed in the making of this video.
Tim was filled with water and weighed about 2.5 pounds, or a bit more than 1 kilogram. I placed each sock on Tim, then holding the socks in place with my hands, I pushed him back and forth, rubbing those precious merino wool fibers unwillingly across the sandpaper. I made sure not to press down or add weight to the plastic foot as best as I could so that every sock got a fair shake at lasting as long as possible. I counted each back and forth motion as one rub, checking the bottom of the sock frequently until it had a hole in it. Once there was a hole, I recorded the number of rubs it took to wrong each sock. Since the results were rather widespread and this test is elementary school science fair level, I repeated the test with the other sock in the pair as well, to make the findings more robust. I know, robust still might be too generous a word here, but try and appreciate the effort. I took the average rub count for each pair of socks, and here are the results. The Costco sock won this test, taking an average of 49 rubs before developing a hole. The -33 and Cloudlines were right there at the top as well, averaging 46 rubs. The next two socks that performed above average were the Farm to Feet at 36 and the Darn Tough at 32 rubs. It does appear that the socks with the tighter weave held up longer than those with looser weaves. The average performers include REI with 30, Smartwool with 28, and the Go With Merino Alpaca Blend with 20 rubs. The Farm to Feet, Boulder, Wigwam, Omni Wool, and Fox Rivers definitely don't hold up to abrasion as well as the other socks in this test. but the thick-threaded, loosely woven Amazon favorites did absolutely terrible. The Alvada averaged only 7 rubs before a hole appeared, and the Time May Tell only 4. In fact, the first Time May Tell sock got a hole after only 2 rubs.
You make me sad.
While this isn't exactly a real-world test, putting tons of time and miles in each sock wasn't exactly within the scope of this video. But I think this abrasion test gave us a good indication of the relative durability of each sock. So how did the $30 Darn Tough do against our less expensive contenders? Pretty average, as it turns out. This chart shows the best performing socks on the top and the worst on the bottom. Up to 5 points were given for each test. The more points, the better. Since comfort and fit is so subjective, I left that score out of the total and only used it as a tiebreaker. 4 socks tied with 25 points, but the luxurious feel of the -33 midweight day hiker and that band around the ankle that really locks it in place on your foot led me to give it the top spot in our showdown. This appears to be a great all-around merino wool sock that's warm, durable, and wicks moisture well. You can't argue against the Costco special Kirkland Signature Men's Merino Wool Blend Full Cushion Socks as our top budget pick at only $3.75 a pair, sold in packs of 4. You can literally buy 8 pairs of these for the price of 1 pair of Darn Toughs. I've been wearing these Costco socks for years and I love them. Kudos to my inner cheapskate on that choice. The Cloudlines are high quality and might come the closest to the Darn Tough in terms of fit and fill, but they're also the closest in price. If you're after more of a boot sock and can sacrifice a little durability, the Fox River Wick Dry Tramper medium weight is warm, it holds its shape, and dries fast. The Go With is a different kind of sock, thick, fluffy, and comfy, but wouldn't be my preference for hiking or work. Then we have the Darn Tough, coming in at 6th place out of 14 with 23 points. There's no denying it, this is a comfortable, high-quality, do-it-all sock. But what you can't deny is that for $30, you're paying up front for a few pairs over your lifetime all at once. Why not get a pack of Costco socks and invest the other $15 in an S&P 500 index fund? Then you've got just as many socks, but you get them all at once, and it'll feel like they're free when you make bank from your little portfolio. I also really liked both farm-to-feed options and the wigwam, but I'm happy to take the remaining options off my table of consideration, especially those Amazon review buyers. Amazon favorites. Time told me to look elsewhere for my socks. If you're picky about socks, then you're really going to have to try some out yourself and decide what you really like. If you want to see more sock videos like this one or other outdoor product tests or comparisons, make a suggestion in the comments.